I had traveled from Lagos to Ibadan 2 days earlier for an official training organized by my company. Everything went according to plan until the program ran longer than expected. By the time it ended, it was already evening. I knew I should have spent the night in Ibadan. My mother had warned me several times before I left Lagos. Bose, if it gets late, don't travel. Book a hotel and continue your journey in the morning. I wanted to listen to my mother, but I was thinking about work. I had an important presentation scheduled for Monday morning, and missing it could affect my chances of getting promoted. Besides, I have traveled between Ibadan and Lagos many times before without any problems. I convinced myself that nothing would happen. That was the biggest mistake of my life. When I arrived at the motor park, it was already close to 9 o'clock. The place was crowded. Conductors were shouting destinations. One conductor noticed me dragging my small suitcase. Lagos, last bus stop, we are leaving now. Without thinking twice, I followed him. The bus was almost full. I greeted the other passengers before taking the only empty seat beside the window. There was an elderly man reading his Bible quietly, a young couple carrying a sleeping child, and 3 quiet men sitting together at the back. Nothing about them seemed unusual. If someone had told me that one of those men was not an ordinary passenger, I would have laughed. At exactly 9:15 p.m., we left the park. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Rain began falling steadily, and the driver reduced his speed because visibility became poor. I tried watching a movie on my phone, but I could not concentrate. I kept feeling uneasy. Every minute, one of the men at the bar would receive a phone call. He spoke so softly that I couldn't hear everything. "We are on our way," he whispered once. A few minutes later, the person called back, and they were discussing on phone. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then he looked around as if he wanted to be sure nobody was paying attention. When our eyes met through the window, he smiled. Something about his smile made me uneasy. I looked away immediately and tried convincing myself that I was simply being paranoid. Around 10:20 p.m., the driver suddenly slowed down. A large tree was falling across part of the road. Several vehicles had stopped ahead of us. It looked like road maintenance. Men wearing reflective jackets stood beside the road waving flashlights. I felt relieved. At least that's what I thought. As soon as our driver rolled down his window, everything changed. One of the men outside pointed a gun directly into our bus. My heart nearly stopped. More men emerged from the darkness surrounding the road. Within seconds, they surrounded our bus. People screamed. The driver raised his hand. Someone began praying loudly. Then something happened that shocked me even more than the guns. One of the quiet passengers who had boarded with us in Ibadan stood up calmly. He wasn't afraid. He walked straight toward the armed men, and one of them greeted him like an old friend. That was when I realized we had been trapped from the very beginning. The kidnappers already had one of their own inside our bus. We never stood a chance. The moment I realized that one of the passengers was working with the kidnappers, every hope I had disappeared. The man pointed at some of us as if he had known exactly who he wanted all along. When his finger stopped in front of me, my legs became weak. "That lady by the window, bring her." One of the kidnappers grabbed my arm before I could even think of resisting. Another passenger begged them to spare him. "I don't have money, please let me go." The leader fired a shot into the air. The sound echoed through the forest and silence fell immediately. Nobody spoke again. They tied our hands. As we walked into the darkness, I kept praying that another vehicle would stop or that the police would appear. Instead, the sound of the highway became fainter with every step we took. Within minutes, it was as if the outside world no longer existed. The forest was thick, wet, and quiet. Rain soaked my clothes. More than once I slipped in the mud, but every time I fell, one of the kidnappers dragged me back to my feet. Nobody knew where we were. Nobody could hear us. After what felt like forever, we reached a hidden camp deep inside the forest. It wasn't just a place to hide, it looked organized. There were shelters covered with tarpaulins, cooking pots over open fires, stack of food supplies, plastic chairs, jerry cans of water, young men carrying guns as if they are security guys. That was when I understood this wasn't their first operation. They had done it many times before. We were ordered to sit on the wet ground while they searched our belongings. They collected our phones, wallets, ATM cards, identity cards, and jewelry. One kidnapper held my phone and asked for the password. I hesitated. He slapped me so hard that I nearly fell over. "Open it!" With trembling hands, I unlocked my phone. He scrolled through my contact until he found the number saved as Mommy. He smiled. "This one will cry tonight." A few minutes later, they called my mother. I couldn't hear everything she was saying, but I heard her voice shaking as if she answered. One of the kidnappers handed me the phone. "Tell her you are alive." The moment I heard my mother's voice, I broke down. "Mommy, Mommy." She started crying immediately. "Bose, where are you? What happened?" Before I could answer, the kidnapper snatched the phone away. "If you want to see your daughter alive, don't call the police. We will contact you again." He ended the call. That was the last time I heard my mother's voice for several days. The following morning was the longest day of my life. We were given only a little sachet of water to share, and a handful of dry garri without sugar. Some of the older captives could barely swallow it. An elderly man who had been taken with us was diabetic. He quietly explained that he needed his medication. The kidnappers ignored him. By evening, he was visibly weak. Watching him struggle made me realize that surviving there had very little to do with strength. It depends on luck. Every day blended into the next. Sometimes the kidnapper argued among themselves. Sometimes they disappeared into the forest for hours. Sometimes they brought in new captives. Each arrival reminded me that more families were beginning the same nightmare mine was living through. One afternoon, I noticed something. One of the younger kidnappers seemed nervous. Unlike the others, he avoided looking directly at us. When one of the older captives collapsed, he secretly handed him an extra sachet of water. He wasn't kind, but he wasn't as hardened as the others. Days later, heavy rain began falling again. As everyone rushed to protect their supplies from the storm, in the confusion, I noticed that two guards had left their usual positions. At almost the same moment, distant gunfire echoed through the forest. The kidnappers froze. More gunshots followed. Someone shouted that security forces were approaching. The kidnappers grabbed their weapons and scattered in different directions. Some tried to move us deeper into the forest, but the confusion worked against them. The sound of the approaching voices grew louder. Within minutes, armed security personnel entered the camp from multiple directions. The kidnappers fled, and after a brief exchange of gunfire, the forest became quiet again. An officer carefully cut the restraint from my wrist. "You are safe now," he said. For days I had imagined rescued, but when it finally came, I couldn't move. My legs gave away, and I burst into tears. We were taken out of the forest, one careful step at a time. When we reached the roadside, I saw ambulances, security vehicles, and people waiting anxiously. Then I saw my mother. She ran toward me before anyone could stop her. Neither of us spoke. We simply held each other and cried. Months have passed since that night. But some parts of me never came back. That night did not take my life. It took away certainty that I would ever feel completely safe again.